We have everyone back. Do you want me to get started?
Yeah, we can get started now.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Allison. I lead the Dev Degree program at Shopify, and I'm, I hope to be able, I should be able to answer all your questions. But they asked me to come today to tell you about Dev Degree, and I'm happy to do that. I'll let you know that I can talk about Dev Degree forever, so I will try really hard not to do that, but please don't hesitate to ask me questions and stop me. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, and maybe your moderators can help me keep an eye on the chat too. And if they can just let me know when a question comes in, I'd be more than happy to answer that. So we're going to talk about Dev Degree. How about what is Dev Degree? That's kind of a great thing to talk about. Dev Degree is a work integrated computer science program. It's pretty unique. What happens in Dev Degree is that students attend a computer science class at one of our university partners at the same time that they work for Shopify. How does that actually work? It means it's in a 2 or 3 year programs. They spend the first year taking their first year courses at university, about 3 courses a term, and they take the training path at Shopify. That training path is an 8-month full stack web on Ruby on Rails, which is what we work at Shopify. And then afterwards, they can join up to 4, it depends on how long the program is, but they can join up to 4 different development teams and work in different areas of Shopify. So generally, all our students start out in a front end or back end placement, but then they move around. Some of our students end up in data, they end up in security, they end up in production engineering. Our students actually end up all over the company, which is pretty cool. So, I've got a fancy slide with animations. When you leave Dev Degree, you end up with a lot of academic experience, a lot of work experience, and no debt. So we cover all your tuition as well as pay you a part-time salary, which includes vacation and benefits, some benefits and things like that. We like to say at Dev Degree, you graduate with a degree and a resume, which is pretty cool. The question is, how is this different than like a co-op program, like a traditional co-op that you might take at University of Waterloo or maybe another school? And it's a 4-year program at Dev Degree, because at Dev Degree, you're actually getting academic credit for your work experience. So you take 3 courses a semester, and you also take a practicum course. And then by tracking your learning outcomes, usually you submit a report at the end of the semester, you actually get course credit for your work. So you can do it in 4 years rather than 5. Any questions yet? No questions? Awesome. Okay. So what does it look like? So we have 3 partner universities. We have 2 in Canada, Carleton University and York University. At York, it's the Lassonde School of Engineering. And both of those are 4 years honors degree. They're bachelors in computer science. At York, it's actually a Bachelor of Science in computer science. One is in Ottawa, one is in Toronto. They're very on campus. It's a very traditional student experience. Our students still get to join teams. They join clubs. They are active in the school community. And the schools are both back in person now, which is great. Dominican University of California is different. It's a 3-year degree instead of a 4-year degree, and it's remote. So in the pandemic, Shopify decided that we would be what we call digital by design or digital by default. That means we didn't go back to offices. We decided we would be a work at home company. So our students are working from home, working from school as well. So at Dominican, they're studying remotely too. So they're able to take classes online for their applied computer science degree. what does it kind of look like? So you're spending about 20 to 25 hours a week at Shopify, and you're spending about 20 to 25 hours a week at school. That can look like 3 courses a semester. School is not, Shopify is very good at remaining in the workday. We can be very flexible in that. So that looks like about 2.5 days a week. School doesn't stick in that timing so well. You know, you come up to exam period and all of a sudden you're doing all this extra studying, or you come up to end of term, you have all these assignments in. At Shopify, we can be very flexible for those times. Some folks use vacation, some folks just bank time with their teams. They know it's coming. They like work extra hours ahead of time or afterwards. But it's generally, we encourage a split between the 2 different environments. So that might look like full days at Shopify, Tuesday and Friday. I will say that most of the time our students don't work on Fridays. They'll do 2 days on, like they might do Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, like with a half day one of those days, and then spend the other times on work. It's all about when your classes are and when you have time to focus on school. And it's different. And our teams know that it's different every semester depending on classes. So our students get good at picking courses based on what they want their schedule to look like, and communicating that to their teams. So Dev Degree is all about learn by doing, growth through support, and own your own development. What does learn by doing mean? It means that we really believe that experience or application is an important part of learning. When you go to school, you get a lot of theory. What we do with the training path is we kind of preload you with a lot of hands-on experience with JavaScript, with Rails, with databases and SQL, so that as you're working in teams and solving problems, you're actually learning how to apply what you've learned in school. Whether you do it before or after, what I've heard from our students anecdotally is that they'll cover the theory in class, but they're able to like absorb the concept really quickly and go deeper because they've had the hands-on experience, or they have the opportunity to work and solve problems. When they're working on teams, they have a lot of support. So when they're on teams, every student has a mentor and a lead, and that mentor works with them very closely, setting up development plans, pair programming together, and just really understanding where a student is in their learning journey and how to keep them learning through that. So we give our students an opportunity to get a lot of feedback. So our mentors and leads work together to give performance reviews every 4 months, or like every term. You have a chance to get feedback on your performance. We have monthly check-ins with mentor and leads. They'll have weekly one-on-ones with their mentors and monthly one-on-ones with their leads. So you always have an opportunity to ask questions and get feedback on the work they're doing. And at the same time, we recognize that your growth is your own. So I said that there's maybe up to 4 different teams you can work on at Shopify. This is pretty cool. And this is, again, something that's really different from a co-op program. A co-op program, you're going to be looking for your own co-op experiences, and you'll probably be getting your subsequent co-op experiences based on your experience from your first couple of co-ops. So what you're doing is you're bringing your demonstrated experience. Like you'll be saying, hey, I've had 3 co-op experiences in production engineering, and so I'm applying for this production engineering co-op at my next company. In Dev Degree, what you're doing is you're actually trying different things. So you, like I said, you might start in front end, then you might go to back end, and then you might explore data a little bit and understand how Shopify works with its data infrastructure. And then you might go back to a front end position because you really enjoyed front end, but because you have that data context, you're really good at understanding what the front end needs to look like to really reflect the user experience, because you can see the data and understand how to work with it. And this applies to many different pathways. It might apply, like you might be really interested in security. A lot of our interns are in our security teams and learning a lot about that. Production engineering, I've already mentioned that. We have a lot of mobile development teams as well. So there's a lot of opportunities to explore different areas, and it's up to you how you want to explore. We use the phrase, we're looking for a T-shaped developer. And what does that mean? And if you think about like a capital T, you've got a lot of breadth or context, and you've got an interest in a deep knowledge in one area. So what we're hoping to do with the 4 placements is we get your preferences, because we want you to explore, but we also want you to find that area of depth that you want to specialize in. And that works really well for our students, for sure. Aha, the team, that's Derek. And he's one of our instructors on our training path team. So you can start Dev Degree without any programming experience. We have folks who come in with tons of programming experience. We have folks who come in with just a little bit of programming experience. Our application is not based on that demonstrated experience. It's based on potential. So what we do in that first 8 months is we don't throw you on a team right away. Even folks with lots of programming experience may never have seen Ruby and Rails before. That's true of some of our full-time developers as well. So it's doubly true with our interns. And what we do in the training path is we kind of bring you through an introduction to programming. You're learning JavaScript. You're learning our front end architecture, so like maybe GraphQL, React, and you're learning data, a little bit of SQL, and you're learning Rails and Ruby, so that when you finish that 8 months and we put you on a team, you kind of know what you're looking at. And then you can start having impact right away. Our interns are all working on production code, which is really meaningful and super fun. You can what your work is doing is actually making a difference to our merchants. But it's our training path team who's working with you during that training path to help give you that hands-on experience with coding. The Ontario universities and our partner Dominican are set up in the same way. They're not expecting you to have programming experience when you come in. But we can definitely challenge you if you do have programming experience, for sure. So it's really just kind of a level setting. But our courses don't really look like school courses. We're not going to give you an exam. We'll introduce you to concepts, give you lots of chance to practice, and then throw you into a group project together. So you can get used to that collaborative way of working on teams. We use GitHub. We want you familiar with the tools you're using on the same tools that our software development teams use at Shopify, so that, like I said, when you join the teams, you know the tools that they're using. All right, our student success team. So, and this is one of our interns. I love the fact that we used our real interns in our pictures and our slides. So our student success team is there basically to help you be successful. So that's part of that support network. When you're on teams, you're working with mentors and leads, but if you run into a problem, our student success coaches are there. We offer group coaching sessions with your peers. If there's a problem working with your team, we intervene. We understand that for a lot of our interns, this may be like their first time in a professional work environment like this. So, we don't expect you to know everything. We're there to help teach you the skills of working together on teams. And we also, I like how this says cheerleader. We're your biggest fans when you're a part of Dev Degree or even thinking about applying to Dev Degree. But we're here to help support the interns through the program. Aha, applications. And the first 3 pictures, if you go from left to right, these are all interns who've actually now all graduated. So I guess they're alumni, which is pretty excited. And these 3 folks are all working full-time in Shopify. And Alejandro here at the far right, he's one of our mentors and leads who's been working with the program for so long. So our applications open in September. They will be open. We don't have a date yet. We're still trying to figure that out, but they'll be open this fall for next fall for September 2023. And people ask me all the time, like, how can I prepare for my application? But what's really important is in your application is to just be yourself. So like I mentioned before, our applications are based on, like, we're looking for potential. We have some personal statements. They ask you questions on things like teamwork, initiative, resilience, collaboration. These are all the things that we've identified that will help you through the program. And we have some computational thinking questions. These are just math questions. We got them based on a research study that, defined ways to identify that you're ready for a computer science degree program. But we really just want to hear about you, and we want your application to be as authentically you as possible. So what do we want to know? We want to know about what you're passionate about. We want to know how you spend your time. Where do you feel you've had the most impact? And that's an interesting word. And I think I've used it before when I talked about interns joining team and how quickly they could have impact. We use the word impact to talk about how our work is recognized, like how our work has made a difference. So how do you feel you've made a difference? And have you made a difference in your family, in your community, or in the folks around you? When we're thinking about resilience, we want to know how you failed. Failure isn't a bad word. It's part of learning. I can tell you how often I failed and what great things I've learned as part of that. So what did you learn from something you failed at? And what's really important is, why are you interested in a degree in computer science? And why are you investing the next 3 or 4 years of your life in computer science? What's fascinating about it to you? And do you understand what that means? Like, computer science is problem solving, but it's problem solving that has the potential to have a huge impact on people's lives. And at Shopify, our product helps entrepreneurs. It helps our merchants perhaps be independent, to have a company, to support people, to offer jobs. Like, that's just a huge impact that your programming skills can have. We also want to know how you manage your time. So like I talked about what Dev Degree looks like, kind of like half at school, half at work. We know that you're going to have to be really good at time management to come in and be successful at Dev Degree. There's not a lot of time to learn time management. We kind of want you to have that down already. Just about everybody we interview has that figured out. So just talk about your calendar. What I've learned, I learn every year the new apps that people use to help them focus, the new tricks that people use. Gosh, I think like 3 years ago, I learned about the Pomodoro technique. I now use that every day. Time blocking was a big thing last year. It is now like part of my life. I love Dev Degree interviews. And we always learn good tips and tricks on how people manage their time. I don't think there's anyone busier than a grade 12 student trying to get into university. Like, that's a lot. Breathe life into your application. Our recruiter, Tristan, wrote this, but how can you put yourself into your application? So here's the same thing again, but quickly jotting down what makes you, like, what are your answers to these questions? That's what we want to hear about for sure. Aha, I've reached the end. Any questions about Dev Degree? I'm sure that went like a lot faster than we thought it would.
If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat and we can answer them for you.
I was just wondering if maybe you could tell them a little bit about what you do at Shopify, because I'm not sure if everyone's heard about it.
Yeah, for sure. I do this. I do Dev Degree. So and let me tell you about why I do Dev Degree, which is kind of an interesting story. I did my computer science degree like forever ago. And as I'm sure some of you feel like, I really didn't like my computer science degree. I was pretty much the only female in a lot of my classes, and it was pretty uncomfortable. And I couldn't really understand why I was like writing these programs in Pascal, which was like ancient. And I was ready to quit. Instead of quitting, I did a 16-month internship. And I loved my internship. And all of a sudden, I was using the skills I'd learned in the classroom to work and to solve problems, like real problems. Like I was implementing password aging. I was working on an app, like a call center app. I really enjoyed that. And that got me through my degree. And I started working as a software developer. And eventually I kind of changed. I was working on software development teams, which were just as uncomfortable as software development classrooms. I can tell you that. And then I ended up in the education space. So I was still being technical, but I was teaching. And then I actually started my own company with Shopify as a platform. I was teaching kids technology, using my own kids as staff to teach kids how to use like basic electronic components, build circuits, make noises and buzz through arts and crafts. So we were playing all this fun stuff. I was playing with conductive thread and conductive paint and buzzers and markers and motors. It was so much fun. And using Shopify to sell our kits. And then Shopify called and said, we think you've got a good take on education and we're trying to run this program. And I was like, okay, I'll help. And I've stayed ever since, because this is a program I would have wanted when I was in school. Another really cool aspect of the program, when I talk about our application process and that it's based on potential, is that we screen interviews without looking at who's applying. We don't see name. We don't see we don't see where you're from. We don't see any of that information. It's our program is 50% female identifying, which is pretty amazing for a computer science program. Our university partners do not have that percentage in their classrooms. But what our program offers is, with that cohort who's joining you at school, you have a support network. One of the profs we work with describes it as like a small college experience. So you may be sitting in a class of 100 or a couple hundred in like your first year CS class, but you've actually got your fellow Dev Degree students there with you. And it's a supportive environment and peer group that can actually make your student experience a lot easier. That's a whole bunch of story, Alexa, and a whole bunch of background that talks about why I'm working here in Dev Degree, but it's the program I would have really thrived in If I was doing my computer science degree now, it would have been in something, I would have preferred something like this for sure. So that's why I'm still here doing this with Shopify. And I like working with Shopify. Like I said, I was a merchant before I was an employee, and I think Shopify is such a great product to help entrepreneurs.
That's really interesting. I like the story behind it, and I like that you were actually working there too. So you see like what it's like to be working with them and then to work for them.
Yeah, I was pretty nervous about joining a software development company, but I really believed in the program. So I'm happy to be here for sure.
And then I was also wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the program like goes with the university. So do you apply for university and then tell Dev Degree that you've gotten in and now you're applying, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. They're like two parallel streams. So if you're coming out of high school, you're going to be like, I'm not sure what to do, right? Like I'm still trying to plan all these different things. But what you do is you apply, if you're thinking about Dev Degree, apply to at least one of our university partners as part of your university applications in January, like through the Ontario University, UAC, or whatever you call that. And when you apply, you put the program stream, like you have to be able to get into the honors computer science program or the Bachelor of Applied Science program at Dominican. And at the same time, so you're doing that and you just pick the program stream that if you don't get into Dev Degree, you'd be happy in that program stream, because there's game development, there's all sorts of different program streams, but you have to be able to get into the honors computer science program. And then when our applications open way earlier than the university ones do, but you apply to us at the same time. And so you're kind of going through both, and you get a university acceptance, and you would also get an acceptance into Dev Degree. In Dev Degree, we usually close our applications in February. We have an interview process. So we do the same kind of process that we do for full-time software developers at Shopify. We do what's called a life story, and then, which is really just talking about yourself, talking about why you're awesome, because you are all awesome. And then we also do a technical interview. And everyone's nervous about the technical interview, but you don't have to. It's more of a problem-solving interview. We're not going to ask you to code. We're just going to ask you to work through problems with a couple of our devs and maybe one of our instructors, and we'll see how you solve problems. So we will let you know. It's usually sometimes like Carleton has early acceptance. York doesn't have early acceptance. But we'll let you know before you have to tell the university that you accept their offer, if you're accepted into Dev Degree or not. So it's like two parallel lines that like join up at the end.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any other questions?
Can you tell me a bit about this program and what you've been doing as part of it?
Yeah. Do you want to know like about Hervolution or about like this week's program?
Probably about this week's program, because we've been working with Hervolution for a while. I've come to like
Yeah.
stemming up before, but I think this program's a little different, and I'm wondering about your participants.
You too, Shed. Do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure. So the GoSTEM program is a week long, and we've been focusing on topics. So we have speakers coming from engineering backgrounds. We recently had a doctor come in.
Cool.
We have someone coming in from cybersecurity, and the program is run by our ambassador committee. So they're responsible for coming up with different activities. And yeah, so each day we focus on a different aspect of STEM. So we usually have like a guest speaker, and it's followed by an activity if they have one, and then we leave room for questions. So yeah, so that's what the program's about basically.
Awesome. So, I'm here talking about Dev Degree, which is one way to study computer science, but maybe I can talk about all the different things you can do with a computer science degree.
Yeah,
Uh,
That'd be good. Yeah.
yeah, because, you know,
Today,
a lot of folks are like, oh, computer science, you know, that's the guy, because it's usually a guy, but that's the guy in the dark room sitting and coding all day.
yeah.
And like that, I mean, if you do a Google image search, it's kind of embarrassing what comes up. And for some folks, that's the truth. You know, they're happy doing a lot of coding, and the coding is fun. I've always loved coding because it's like puzzling, it's like problem solving. Um, and a lot of folks really get into the language itself. A lot of our interns end up on like our Ruby team or our Rails team, actually working with open source communities. What a lot of people don't realize is that building, like working with a professional software development team is actually super collaborative, because you have to work with the team. You have to make sure that what you're working on fits in with what everyone else is working on. And that can be a lot of communication and back and forth and understanding. And as you advance in that stream of your career, it's really cool kind of architecting these big projects that support lots of people. Because a lot of times you'll be coding and you'll like, you know, come up with a little app that runs on your window, in your window or on your desktop. But like, how do you grow an app so that it can support people all over the world in really fast, in really fast streams? And just like, how do you do that? Like, how can someone in India and someone in BC have the same experience, when, like, especially for an online commerce, like their currency is different, everything is different. So the problems you're solving can be really complex and interesting, which is pretty cool. But a lot of folks with a computer science background, a lot of folks end up, you know, they might be coding for a while. They might be more interested in project management or product development. Like, how do people actually work together? You know, to project management is like, okay, I've got a team of people and I've got to solve this big problem by like date X. And I ended up in project management for a long time. I found that a very interesting problem to solve too. And understanding the technology underneath really helps. Product management is like, okay, we've developed this product, but like, what are the features we have to add to make the product work? And again, sometimes that understanding of how of what you actually can do can help make your product development career stronger as well. A lot of folks go into education and teaching, and you have to know something really well before you can teach it, for sure. So that's an interesting field to go into as well. And a lot of folks really like to stay in the academic side of computer science, and that's like a really interesting world. Bringing new ideas, like bringing new ways of having computers solve problems. So there's like a mathematical aspect to it. Like, how do we get computers to work faster? How do we get our software to work faster? But then there's like computer vision is always so interesting, and which you going into like augmented reality or virtual reality. Like it's still such a relatively new field. There's just lots of areas to explore. As a developer, even, what I always liked about computer science is that I could learn a lot about different disciplines. One of my favorite things to do is to read. I've always loved books and I've loved libraries. One of my first jobs leaving school was working for a library. So I was actually writing the code that that made a library virtual. This, like I said, I did my degree like forever ago. So back then, it was really novel to have like online books and online resources. So I was actually building websites that our reference librarians would use to track their searches and queries, so that if they, if they could remember a search, they could pull up all the resources they'd used in the past. At the same time, I was supporting the website where we had our first online resources. So I really liked working with librarians. Then I moved to working with educators, and we were creating some of the first online courses. And that was really cool. I like the way teachers think. So I learned a lot about how to teach and how learning outcomes are put together to build a course. And then we used, I used my technical background to help move courses online. Then I pivoted again to documentation. So I was working with product building tools to support writing something once and reusing it in multiple different areas. So I got to work with writers, yet another population of folks who were really interesting to work with. So even though I didn't become a librarian, I didn't become a writer, I eventually kind of moved into teaching. But I got to explore all of these different fields, and my technical background helped me support the folks in that field and help make their jobs easier and really kind of expand their work and what it means. So that was something. I know when I first took a computer, like when I was in high school trying to decide what to do, I didn't pick computer science. I ended up picking this space science at York, which was a combination of physics and computer science. And then I got smart a couple of years in, and I was like, well, where am I going to work? And there wasn't a lot of places back then. So I'm like, okay, with computer science, I can work anywhere. And that's been true, which is great. And it's even more true now that so many software development companies are virtual. So I'm enjoying working at home right now. I live in the east end of Toronto in this crazy place where I can actually walk down to the beach. And I started my day at a yoga class, and I'm going to end my day on the paddleboard because I don't have to commute downtown anymore, which used to take a long time. So I have enjoyed that aspect of my degree as well. That was a whole bunch of talking. I hope that was useful for some folks, for sure.
Yeah, it was. It's interesting to hear like where you started and how your path has changed from just like I'm sure there's a lot of people that work in computer science that have just done the same job, sit like at the same desk for years and years, but it's interesting to see like the different ways you can use that.
Yeah, and you can what I do find is that in technology companies now, there's a lot of shifting and growth, and that's very much a tech thing. So things come and things go. So I know when I was thinking of work, I'd be like, I'm going to be doing the same thing forever. That's what my dad did. My dad worked for Ontario Hydro for his entire career almost, but it's really not like that anymore. So a lot of folks you can you start off and you grow and you change, but you always have those kind of foundational skills to support you as you move throughout your career. And I have found that the computer science skill set is there's the abstract thinking, the way of breaking problems down, and understanding how the web actually works just really helps when it comes to working with the technology and working with different disciplines. Like I said, working with the librarians and the writers and the trainers, looking at what they did in the abstract has always, with those foundational skills I learned, writing code when I wasn't sure what foundational skills I was learning, has been very beneficial for my career path, for sure.
Now we're kind of like interviewing you, but do you want to
That's
maybe
totally okay.
talk about what you do during a day or like what does a normal day look like?
Yeah, for sure. And my day is so different than it was just a couple of years ago, because a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, I used to commute, go into the office, talk to people. And now my day is my commute is really short. I have to walk up all the stairs. You've probably figured out I'm in an attic. But I'm still talking to people all day. So a lot of virtual meetings like this. We use Slack. Like I spend my whole life in Slack now. And I have to be really careful how I manage my time. So I try to make sure I don't have too many meetings so I can spend time thinking strategically, as well as working with my team. So my day, like I'll start my day off with a daily stand up, like, hey team, we all say good morning and kind of what we're working on. If anybody has any blockers, like what's a blocker, something that's stopping you from getting work done that they need help with, they'll put their hand up. I'll get a few messages about changes or problems that we have to solve in the program that are going on. I try to do a lot of reach outs like this, come talk to people about why Dev Degree is so awesome. And I am also talking to our university partners and trying to learn more about different kinds of programs like this so that we can maybe find new university partners or find new ways of helping our students. So a lot of time spent in research, a lot of time spent reading, just kind of reading the education, the ed tech news to try to figure out what's new, what should I be keeping my eye on, what's going on in the environment, and then helping my team solve problems and move through problems, see what Shopify's doing. Shopify's always doing something cool. Some things take more time than other things. And making sure, like I talked about our training path, making sure our students are using, like if we're using a new tech in Shopify, I want to make sure that our students are using that new tech in their training path. So talking to the instructor team, trying to figure out, how can we put more of this in the curriculum? My favorite thing to do is talk to our interns. I try to make sure to talk to at least one intern every week. We have this like channel called Sidekicks where we get randomly introduced to them. And I like hearing about what they're working on, what they're experiencing at school, and what they're learning on their teams. And they always blow me away. I just love hearing about what they're doing on their teams.
So how do you relate, like, what's your relationship with the interns? Like, are they in a different team? Or like, do you
Yeah.
have your own team?
Yeah, I have my own team who supports the interns. And for the first 8 months when they're on the training path, they report up into us. So we're all one team. And then they go off on their different teams. So I have a Slack channel for all the leads and mentors so we can keep in touch with what's going on. And I talk to the interns and I try to get their preferences so we can match them up with the next placement. We have 3 cohorts of graduating interns now. So I also have an alumni crowd that we keep in touch with, and they're great and resourceful and are always willing to help us out and act as mentors to our interns. So we're not, we kind of watch we're not directly involved in the day-to-day of our interns, but we're always there as like probably like a safety net. Like we make sure that their performance reviews are happening. We make sure that maybe it's time for them to get a raise. We make sure that happens. We're always there, just kind of making sure that things are working smoothly, but trying to stay back a bit. So it's really up to the interns to do the learning with their mentors and leads, but we're there for help if they need it.
So I know we have like a little bit of time left. So would you be interested in answering some of our panel questions that we have?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to do that.
Okay, so the question categories range from early career, workday, and skills personal growth. You may have answered some of these questions, so I'm going to try and pick some of the questions that we haven't touched on. So the first one would be, did you have any role models growing up? If so, who are they?
Oh, that's interesting. I probably got a lot of my role models out of the movies, which, we didn't have a lot of exposure to much else. pre-internet for sure. So, and my dad was a big role model for me. He's a chemical engineer and he worked for Ontario Hydro. And what was cool is that he'd bring home some of the new technology of the time, and he'd let me kind of play with it. So he had like the first cell phone, which like came in a suitcase, and he had a laptop, which was the same size as like a desktop. And like one panel of it would fold down to be a full-size keyboard. And it had like this little screen, and it had two like 5.25-inch floppy disks, the big ones, not even those little ones that no one's seen ever, except as like the little save icon. And that really inspired me to like, it was just great to be exposed to that technology and to see my dad kind of at work solving problems, and really enjoyed that aspect of it. I'll say my mom was a librarian, and I loved, like I said, I love books. I loved hanging out at the library. And she was actually an early computer programmer when computer programming was done by punch cards. So she worked for Honeywell Computers, and she just told me the stories. And she would, when someone would write a program, she'd actually punch all the holes in the card. And I found that fascinating. So those, growing up in a small town, Ontario, those were the role models I had available to me. And it is so inspirational now to see the folks who are going out and actually making change. I'm very inspired right now by Dean Jane Goodyear at Lassonde, and Lisa Cole, who is the director of their K to I, they call it, K to Industry program at school. And they're Dean Goodyear is making some changes at Lassonde to actually bring in more programs like Dev Degree and more apprenticeship style programs where you're working at the same time as you're learning, which makes school more accessible, and it makes the type of learning more hands-on rather than reading books and more theoretical. And Lisa's doing just a phenomenal job, like setting up STEM programs with high schools, and actually working with the ministry and changing policies so that change can roll out and happen across the province instead of just like in one program somewhere. So I'm finding those folks as role models right now.
That's amazing to hear. So the next question is going to touch on the topic of your workday. So is there something that surprised you about your job when you first started?
Our offices surprised me about Shopify when I first started there. And but I think what always surprises me in such a good way is how amazing our interns are and how amazing young people are. I feel like the future is in really good hands right now. And I'm just so happy to be able to provide that pathway, or that pathway forward for folks.
That's great. So we're going to be talking about skills and personal growth. So the first question is, what skills do you think are important for someone interested in a career like yours?
Oh, that's interesting. And I'll speak about our interns too, because people are always worried about their technical skills. Like, oh, I don't know React Native, or, oh, I don't know if I'm a JavaScript expert. But what I have seen is that you can learn the technical skills, but sometimes it's the collaboration and people skills that are the hardest to learn, because it can feel really awkward asking for help. And you can be really unsure of yourself, right? Like something like imposter syndrome can like stop you cold. That's where you feel like if maybe you're the only woman in your computer science class, you can start to question why are you there? But learning how to manage that, learning how to share and collaborate, and learning that the work you're doing has value and you should be able to talk about it to get more feedback on it. Those kind of skills are super important and worth practicing. The technical skills will come, that's just practice. You'll get that. There's lots of information available, but being able to speak up, being able to share your work and ask for help are really, really important skills for anyone in their jobs.
Yeah, that's a very important point you brought up. So, do you have any advice for young women interested in STEM?
Uh, yes, keep in touch with other young women who are interested in STEM. So these something like this Go STEM program is wonderful. And it's also a network of folks who are interested in the same things you are. So make an effort to join networks and to stay in touch with folks. Because sometimes you are still in environments where it's just you. And you need that support network that you've developed to move through that environment for sure.
Mm. And we have one more question. So, what should someone expect once they start their career or education in STEM?
Hmm. Expect to be challenged. Expect a little bit of imposter syndrome. That happens in all careers, not just STEM careers, where you're like, is this right? And is my work like just expect that. It's a pretty natural feeling, both for men and women. Everyone kind of goes through that as they're expecting something new. Expect that it won't always be easy, and expect that it's harder to understand if you're succeeding. I think, and again, that's any career, where it's kind of like in school, you know what to do to get the A plus, right? And you know how that looks. But in work, it's not as straightforward. And I see in my students sometimes they struggle with that, right? They're like, did I get the A plus at work? Like how does that work? But what you're really doing is developing skills to ask for feedback and to give feedback and to know and to listen to yourself. Like sometimes we like to throw ourselves against challenges, and that can be good. But sometimes we also have to know how to take care of ourselves as we're meeting a challenge. So expect, gosh, what to expect? Expect everything, right? I think, and expect to, I want to say there's a lot of reward there, and a lot of learning, and not just the learning of the technology or the learning of the field, but the learning about yourself. And I think that's true for every career, is that as you're learning and working and progressing, what you're really doing is finding out more about yourself, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, that's very important. So that's all the questions I had. So if Alexa or any of the participants had any more questions, feel free to include them in the chat.